Thank you so much for joining us. We're here with Sandeep Shekhar. So, Sandeep, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in sales.
Yeah, so I come up with more than 18 years of experience in SaaS-based B2B sales concept. Started my journey as an SDR back in 2005 with a company called Cvent. So I was 26th employee, $3 million company, spent about a decade there. When I left, we were 1,800 people strong with $1.65 billion. So I've been building the team for startups, right from the ground up. I'm very passionate about coaching and mentoring and making sure we're shaping up the career of the salespeople. I think it's the most lucrative profession to be in if it's done right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I'm doing at Sprinto currently. That primarily coaching and mentoring the account executives. Then I'll be moving on to coaching the SDR reps.
Right. And for some of the listeners who aren't too aware, so give us a little bit more clarity on what's the role of an SDR, and then is that the typical position that a junior salesperson will join at? And then what's the progression like from the SDR, and what are the other roles in sales itself?
Sure. That's a great question. So SDRs are, I think, one of the most important position in any company because they carry a lot of weight in terms of the first interactions. Basically, you have a two kind of sales motion that goes in. So outbound motion, and you have inbound traffic coming in. The primary function of the SDR role, SDR reps, is to really strike the conversation, unpack the problems and the pains, and then hooking relevance, connecting all the dots by doing the pre-call research and making sure that they are penetrating into the ICPs, which is ideal customer profile that your company has defined and where you are selling into. And their job is to really qualify, understand, conduct problem-based discoveries,
right,
and then ultimately pass that lead to account executive for further closures and all. So that's the function as a junior rep.
So ultimately, cultivating what is initially a cold lead and then kind of warming them up, or identifying whether this lead is cold or warm and whether this can be passed on for further maturation down the pipeline.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you touched on another term there, ICP, ideal customer profile. So this is something that I think a lot of startup founders need to know and need to have strong awareness of in really creating the profile of the customer that you're trying to target, because you're going to save so much time, because you might have a strong lead generation tool or lead generation process where you get 200 leads per week, but if only 5 of those are going to go to a demo call, then the quality for leads is really poor. So that might be down to having a poor ideal customer profile and not really understanding your customer's needs properly. So that process, in your experience, is that something that's done organization wide, where the management team sits down, everybody sits down and has a conversation about this, or who really comes up with those ideal customer profiles?
Yeah, that's a great question again. So in the startup world, obviously the founder-led selling that happens because you have picked up the problem that you're trying to solve for a particular industry or domain, as per se. So like at Sprinto, we decided to solve the problem for any startup or SaaS-based company that need to get compliant faster and more automated fashion. So our ICP here is definitely, we want to penetrate to any SaaS-based business who have system and processes in place. Like maybe your code repository is going to be on AWS, or you are using some kind of HRMS system. So you definitely want to integrate and bring that level of automation with the workflows and all. Hence, the SaaS-based company is a perfect fit or ICP for a company like Sprinto. So we decided to solve this problem, particularly for that. And it's very important to define your ICP at the top level first, from the founder's perspective when you found a company. And then you want to dive deeper into penetration mode, that these are the ICPs that you need to nail. Yeah, you launch a different product, maybe you identify a different space that you want to go into. That's a different story. But first you need to establish that. I hope answers the question.
No, it definitely makes sense. But then once you have that ICP identified and you really defined it, how do you actually go find those companies in the market? What tools do you use for that?
So there are lead researching tools that's out there. So you've got like some Zoom Info, Apollo, um, and there are some new players coming into the market. So I mean, it's a good investment because you have a set of leads that you can define based on different filters that you can apply there. And you can really narrow down and cherry pick the accounts that you want to go after, including the personas that you need to hit. You need to go after them. So yeah, these are the tools that's on top of my mind right now, and it's a good investment because you can get all the set of leads all together.
Right. And then from the point that you have the leads, you've had an SDR cultivate them, they've come to the conclusion that okay, this is a high potential lead here. So who do they go to with that information?
So yeah, I mean, so if you're a startup, maybe it's a good investment in the sales operation or revenue operations because that department works very closely with the sales team, marketing, and then obviously you have the product team and all this just to make sure that you operationalize the process that you have defined. So once you have identified your ICPs and the persona that you want to go after, you use CRM or customer engagement platforms like Outplay or Outreach of the world, and you define those setup sequences and the steps to make sure that you have a multi threading approach, that you're reaching out to the personas, making sure that you're using the combination of your calls, emails, social touches, basically reach out to the prospect wherever they are available, right? Yeah. And it's a series of steps until you get sometimes it's very hard to get a yes in the first two touch points. So what we have observed that you are more likely to get a response in your 8th or 9th attempt. So it's very important for the SDRs to continue to message, find personalization premise, hook all those relevance, try to get away from the noise and make sure that your conversation is as personalized as it can be.
And that's no easy job, is it? Right? Because most people, when they get told no once or they get rejected once, it's kind of like, okay, well, they didn't want it, so might as well move on. But you're saying 7, 8, 9 times, keep pushing, keep reaching for social contact, and eventually they're so familiar that you're reaching out to them. They're like, all right, you know what? I'll give you the time of day.
So something that creates a recall value, and if you are remaining persistent without crossing the line of being unprofessional, they will more likely respond in a way that who's this guy so desperately wanting to talk to me? And that also depending on your messaging, how customized your messaging is, how really you're coming with a message that that person cares about. And that's where they can, okay, I'm going to give 15 minutes to that person, see what you got. And that's why we want to put our best foot forward, come prepared, that show things or talk about things that that person cares about. Maybe they're solving a problem.
So here's a contrarian question then in that regard. When do you know when it's the right time to walk away? You've given so much to trying to cultivate a lead or trying even later down the pipeline when you're cold calling. But when do you know when it's like, okay, this no is firm enough for me to move on?
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting a cold shoulder from your prospect, hardly any response, but you have hundreds and thousands of leads that might need you to solve their problem. So, I think ideal sequence that we follow is about 12 to 14 touch points before you part ways, which is again combination of 4 or 5 phone calls, emails, social touches. Maybe sending, and you need to be very creative in your approach as well, using some kind of memes, making sure you're using some of the for the lack of my word, some photos or something that get them excited about it.
Yeah.
And when you go through that sequence, but of course now you are loading up or front loading a lot of leads in that sequence, so you keep on moving on if you're not hearing back. So for 12 to 14 touch points could be the ideal sequence to run.
So off the top of my head, I can think of, I guess, 3 touch points because I'm trying to understand more on what are the different types of touch points you can have. So I can think of, cold calling for one, LinkedIn outreach, email, But okay, are there any others that are
Yeah.
glaring obvious ones?
Maybe you can make a video for your prospect. It could be 40 seconds, showing them that you're doing a little bit of research about the company and you looked at that person on LinkedIn, found something interesting. That's where you find, something that it's very important to find that personalization premise as well, that the profile page or maybe something that guy attended a podcast or somebody who's made a post on something or gave a like or comment or something. So I want to pick that and make sure that I sound relevant as well. So let's say if I were to approach you, Suraj, I would simply find you on LinkedIn and see that what are the things that you're liking and caring about. I'll say, Suraj, I looked you up on LinkedIn, and I, interestingly, and I found that you wrote a post about the paradigm shift, the way the podcasts are happening. And one line that stood out to me is, "What are you talking about this or X, Y, Z?" So thanks for putting it out there. In fact, I shared with my team, and they were floored. So
a little bit of flattery never hurts, right?
Yeah, and then here's the second reason that I reached out to you. So typically, I talk to a person like yourself all day long.
Yeah.
And what we are hearing them say is that they're overwhelmed with this, they're concerned about that, they're worried about this. Are you running into these kind of problems, or am I just rambling here?
Yeah.
Now, this in itself is a very personalized approach when you reach out to the people, because if your problem-led conversation and making the call all about your prospect is the way to go.
Right. Okay. So it gives that sense of relevance, comfort, and familiarity.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you would appreciate anybody who's trying to make the story all about yourself.
100%.
And I'm here to help. So for me, selling is helping, basically.
But then I assume that I actually like what you said there. Selling is helping because ideally you want to sell to someone who really has the problem that you're solving, and thereby helping them because you believe in what you're selling, right?
Right.
So I guess a lot of people need to move away from this idea, because I think a lot of people have the idea, including myself in the past, that selling is like this aggressive, forceful thing that you do to extract money from people, right? Whereas it doesn't necessarily have to be thought about like that.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to smell your commission breath far from where you're coming from. So if you lead your conversation in a way that, hey, we're going to help you streamline and automate this process that will help you increase your revenue by 100%. Everybody says that.
Yeah.
Right. So leading with a problem-based statement is something that people really care about. See, if I throw a snake at you, what will you do? You'll flinch. You move away.
Yeah.
If I throw $100 bill, what are you going to do?
Jump up in the air to catch it.
So people, psychologically, if you see that people buy emotionally, justify it logically as well. So that becomes so important conversation that way. So leading your conversation in sales with a problem and unravel those problems, look at the gravity of the problem that you have, becomes so important.
Right, I see. That's really interesting. That's a key insight you just mentioned. People buy emotionally and then rationalize logically later down the line.
Right. Yeah.
I've done that countless times, where you buy something a little bit more expensive than you initially wanted, and then you come home, it was like, this will come in useful then. I can always transfer it, give it secondhand to this relative, that relative.
Yeah, I mean, I bought something expensive, then I had to justify that the reason that I did this is for XYZ reasons.
Absolutely.
Somewhere at the bottom of the, somewhere in your mind, you might be thinking that, did I do that right? Or maybe, so
yeah,
that's the nature of the beast.
But then, okay, so every salesperson must know, like most salespeople know this, right? You lead with the problem, you create relevance, you create familiarity with your prospect, and then you go in, having discussed things that they've liked or they've shared, or podcasts or sort of media that they've been a part of. But isn't there the fear then that prospects know this ahead of time? How do you do it in such a way that is organic and it flows nicely, and it's not this mechanical approach? Because we're essentially making something that should be organic mechanical in the mind of a salesperson. So how do you ensure it maintains that level of organicness?
Yeah, so basically what you're doing is you're interrupting somebody's day by cold calling, and you want to make sure that you show empathy about their time, because if I tell you, like, Suraj, I know that probably we're not expecting my call and it's 11 o'clock in the Monday morning. Nobody likes to get a cold call. Can I just take 30 seconds and I'll tell you the reason for my call? Then you decide whether you want to continue or hang up. Is that fair? So in itself, that you are cognizant of time. I know that you and I have never spoken before, but with your permission, I'll just take 30 seconds and you decide that. That allows you to get softly get your foot in the door. You get that 30 seconds. And then you can say, I have just taken your 30 seconds. Do you want to continue? I mean, if you have a couple of more minutes. So it's all about those mini upfront contract that you get from your prospect.
Yeah.
In a way that you favor. So that's why salespeople, it's very important that how prepared you are for the call. That includes your pre-call research. There should be an intentionality behind why you are reaching out to somebody, right? And because you are solving a particular problem and you have recognized that these are your ICPs and personas that might need help, maybe not talking to a couple of colleagues within the organization that have you observed this problem, or are you hearing the rumblings of this kind of a problem? And then make it very contextual when you talk to somebody. They appreciate that kind of a research. And people understand that, people understand that if I'm grappling with certain problem and if you have a solution for it, right, they're more than willing to give you that 15 or 20 minutes to give best dog and pony show that you can.
And then when's the right time to make the call? Because we talked about, cultivating leads via social touches, but what's the point that you say, all right, I'm ready to call now?
Yeah, so you got to be very methodical about your approach. I mean, you mark your calendar, you block maybe an hour or 2 hours, and you are just getting your skin in the game for cold calling to make sure. Could be anything after 2 p.m. Mondays are a pretty bad time because you are maybe slammed with back-to-back meetings and all. Mm-hmm. But in the morning also, when you were thinking about what we all do when we go to the office, we grab a coffee, we check our emails, we are at our desk, just gearing up for the whole day. And that's when it could be you can catch them something. Maybe around 3 to 4, 5 p.m. These are a good time. That's what I've observed. But there's not any hard
people
rule.
Are kind of zoning out towards the end of the day and are
right.
Yeah, they're more accessible for a distraction or something that's not a part of the scheduled part of the day.
I find Fridays are perfect time because people are in a happy mood. They want to wrap up their week, spending time with the family and kids and joining their games. So yeah, depending on how you catch them, suppose somebody has a bad hair day and you catch them or off guard, then you get slammed on your face too.
I'm sure. Well, that's interesting. You went for that angle of the question because I meant it more in that's really interesting to know. But I meant it more in the sense of at what point is a prospect ready to be called? Can you just cold call someone out of the blue?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You got to pick up the phone and just call. Like I said, there should be intention behind why you're calling this person. Because there are certain criteria that you see that okay, this could be one of the decision maker. He's the above the line guy or but you want to talk to some below the line guy as well, saying that hey, what's going on in your business world? I want to see through your eyes. And I'm trying to set something up at your CEO level or CTO level, but I thought it might make sense to talk to you first. Can I ask a couple of questions? And then you sound so relevant when you get that bigger guy, the power that be, saying that, hey, I ended up talking to a couple of your colleagues. I'm not going to name drop because I promised them I'm going to keep them aside. But, we are hearing these are the problems. It's kind of a cliche. Have you heard about these problems or are you running into these kind of problems? They appreciate this fact that you went to that extent, did your part of research, took the time to talk to colleagues and bringing that up.
Right.
And then so how open-minded would you be to exploring a solution like us, which can help you do X, do this Y as a result and save you time. Whatever the 15 or 20-second commercial that you have. So I wouldn't say there is any great time to prospect. You just pick up the phone and talk and then double hit them with the emails or maybe leave a message with the social touches. Yeah, ask for a meeting right from the first get-go. Mm-hmm. It's you are proposing a girl for marriage in your first date. Nobody likes to be pressured into giving you 15 or 20 minutes if that person don't know you.
Absolutely. It's interesting you raise that comparison because I've never directly worked in sales, but a lot of times when salespeople are talking about how they, cultivate a lead or, create a sense of relevance and familiarity, it reminds you of how people talk about their dating lives when they say, oh, well, we didn't really have that connection or, yeah, it was interesting from the start. We started getting along really well and we were very comfortable at the end of the date. So that's
Right.
very interesting. And also what you said there, it goes back to what you said at the beginning, right? Creating that relevance, ideally the relevance and familiarity to the decision maker. So in this
Right.
case, the decision maker being a founder, CEO, management board, and then they know that, hey, this person really understands their business. They've been taught. In fact, because most CEOs in large organizations could do very well from talking to their entry level staff, because
Right.
then they know all the problem. In fact, I would say a good CEO does that because they know all the problems at the base level and they can kind of really cater to the needs of the organization from the bottom up. So then when someone's done that for them, they're like, hey, you're telling me something that is either reaffirming what I already know, which is music to my ears, because very few people at that high level have someone they can trust or have someone that they can share with. They have other people on the board or other people on the management team, but they all have their own roles as well. So it can be a very lonely place. And then having a salesperson that's like, hey, I've done this research, I've spoke to these people, they're like, hey, this is great. I'm more than happy to speak to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the case. I mean, it's typically like, with the startups, CEOs or founders and co-founders are more available or approachable than a thousand people company because we can have a CEO's assistant who, I mean, he or she could be the second most important person that you talk to because that person knows who is where, who
Yeah.
does what, and everywhere after CEO.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are like different methodologies in the sales process that how you bob and weave into the hierarchy of the company and see that who are the important people who might get involved in driving this initiative, and you got to cast them basically.
Okay. So I got a question about um, the cold calling process itself, and I'm recalling when somebody told me a long time ago. I think actually I read it in a book. When you have you're trying to sell somebody, and then when they're like, "Oh yeah, that's great, that's really cool, that's really interesting," very nice, very nice. That person's not actually like that. Sounds great for validation, but that person's probably not the person who's going to convert and buy what you're
Right.
selling because they're like, "Oh yeah, very interesting, very interesting." They're kind of telling you what you want to hear before they go and say, "All right, well, yeah, I'm not interested" at the end. Whereas it's the person who's kind of really digging in and trying to pick out every single flaw with what you're saying when they're like, well, you said this and this doesn't sound very much like the previous point you made, or well, what if this breaks, or how do you have confidence that this is going to work in these set of circumstances? There's more when somebody is throwing objections at you that they're actually psychologically preparing their mind to make a purchase because they're trying to convince themselves by asking you these questions. But so the question I have is, should you then try to draw out objections from your prospect so that you can, you know, uh, convince them or provide them clarity that their objection is not that big of a deal?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm a big fan of getting the objection because that's the first step to start a conversation. So the objections could be shallow as well, where the meatier objection, which are like more concrete, but shallow objections are those like, "Hey, I'm not interested. Oh, why don't you send me some information?" Or I picked up the phone thinking about somebody else. You know, because they can see that probably you're trying to sell or trick them into buying something because certain verbiage that you use, something goes along the lines of, "Hey, Suraj, this is Sandeep Shekhar at Sprinto. How are you doing today?" Absolutely pattern recognition. You recognize that pattern. But if I reach out to, "Hey, Suraj, this is Sandeep over at Sprinto. How have you been?" It sounds like some acquaintance or maybe one of your friends might be calling you. So it's just
Interesting.
subtle changes makes you talk to. And if somebody says so whenever you get objection, it's very important to join the resistance, right? Typically, what happens when you give objections, you start selling hard, right? Psychologically, I mean, you just do that. One of the ways to really get around this kind of objection is that you join the resistance. So hey, Sandeep, your price is way too high. Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, our price is way too high. In fact, it's a common theme that I hear all the time from our prospective customers. Can I ask a question? Hope you don't get mad at me. So when you say like your price is too high, either you have some number on your mind that you have settled in, or you are comparing us with one of our competitors. So you have something. So help me understand what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you can try and diffuse that objection by joining and agreeing with them. Hey, I'm not interested. I wouldn't be interested either if I get a cold call out of the blue. I totally get it, right?
Yeah.
If you would have been interested, you would have reached out to me, right? Can I ask a question? Can I level with you? Typically, I've been hearing like, I'm not interested a lot recently. And I think like, that's your polite way of saying, hey, go away, you annoying sales rep. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
No? Tell you what, if you just give me 20 seconds and I'll tell you the reason for my call, then you decide whether you want to hang up or continue. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
So there are different ways that you can get around and identify that, hey, I'm in a meeting, right? Or I'm going in a meeting. That could be a shallow objection. So there are like top of the funnel objections. Then you have a not interested can come later also towards the end of the sales cycle. So there are completely different ways that you want to be prepared. And it gives like chills to SDRs and account executives if they're not prepared fully. So you got to get into the character, package it well, and see that what story you are dishing out.
Yeah. Joining the resistance, I think that's probably one of the most insightful things I've heard about objections.
Yeah.
I think it would go beyond sales calls as well, because it reminds me of a friend I had in university, and you know how friends do, they make jokes about each other, have a laugh at each other's expense. But he was a guy, anytime you'd offend him or insult him, he'd take your joke and he'd take it to the next level about himself.
Yeah. Psychologically, you got to laugh at yourself first and be comfortable with that and comfortable with your skin. And then it gives you the right to laugh at others as well.
Yeah. But the effect was it always took the power away from the person who was making the joke, and it brought it back to him. So it's interesting in sales. It's a similar kind of phenomena. They make an objection. They say something that's kind of like alluding to a strong no. And then you actually, instead of saying, oh, no, you got it all wrong. It's like, you got it absolutely right. But let's dig into the logic behind that.
Yeah. I mean, it's also important to take permission from your prospect if you want to sell something, because nobody likes to be sold, right? If you go to the mall and a shop guy, or attendant approaches you, what do? You say no, I'm just checking out. You didn't drive 10 kilometers just to check out, what's there, because you might want to buy something. But something very interestingly that I'm coaching my team to how to establish prospect pact. The pact is all about that, getting that permission from your prospective customers to even ask questions. When you start asking questions like an oral teacher or like admitting nurse, nobody likes to be questioned, right? So I'm coaching about how to establish prospect pact, right? In the beginning, and I call a concept called "it's okay to be not okay." So I would say Mr. Prospect, at any point of time, if I think that we cannot help you out properly, will you be okay if I tell you that much? Ultimately, it's going to save each other a lot of time. And the reaction that you'll see, the facial expression from your prospect, they'll be amused, because hardly salespeople are trying to be that honest and transparent about it. But it also gives me a right to say that, Mr. Prospect, if you think that for some reason you don't want to use our product, will you be comfortable telling me that no as well? Because that'll be the fastest no I would ever receive. In my world, yes is a very good answer. No is the second best answer. Maybe stinks.
Yeah.
And so they'll not leave you high and dry if they have tried to move away from you or move into a different direction or park the things.
Yeah. Interesting. So then how do you deal with the maybes? When a customer don't seem that keen, they're there, they're listening, but they're not really showing any strong commitments. You don't feel a kind of emotional reaction to anything that you've said. What's the best way? Is it to continue the sale, push for next steps, or how do you get? Because what I'm hearing from what you're saying, Sandeep, is that you want a firm answer, and it can be positive or negative. Just give me something firm. No,
right,
yes, whichever. So from those kind of midway prospects, how do you bring out one of those firm answers?
So I think what I understood from you is that how do you tackle maybes, right? In a way
Exactly. Yeah.
that works in your favor. See, I mean, it depends exactly. If your product is not a good fit, or the impact is not big enough. So what's their current state? What's going to be a proposed state? If the gap is not big enough, probably they're not going to be buying the product. And you can make it out from the facial expression right throughout the conversation that probably this is not for you. So I would simply ask that, how are you feeling about this? I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10, 1 being like, you hate it like a canned bread, and 10 being like, should I send you the DocuSign right now? Where do you rank us? And the guy said, 4. Maybe I'll give you 7 or 8, because a negative answer might hurt me because that person is trying to be nice, the prospect. And then I use the reverse psychology. I thought, you're going to give me 3. You give me 8. And then the person will go on and rant about, why I give you 8 and all these things. That's a good indication to see that, whether they want to buy. One question that I would ask is, let's take the commerce off the table for now. If you were to buy today, would you go about buying this? If they are hesitant about this, you go all the way back to the discovery and unraveling that problem and find out what's missing. Is it the missing functionality aligned with you? So that becomes so important there. Then probably you want to move on and see, find out, what didn't resonate with you. Why, do you feel that this is not going to work? Or, that could be that. So it's good to know that how you build your pipeline coverage to ensure that you have enough duck in the pond for you to bite in. If somebody is not a fit, move on.
Yeah. I'm constantly seeing this theme of the element of surprise, doing the unexpected. What is the most typical thing you do when someone rejects you? You fight harder, but you're saying do the opposite. What's the most typical thing you do when someone gives you a compliment? Like, hey, I'm 8 out of 10 to making the sale. You reverse it and said, use reverse psychology, and you say, hey, I thought you were going to give me a 2 or a 3, actually.
Yeah.
So I guess what if you were to summarize the psychology behind that? What's going on there in the mind of a prospect? Is it that, oh, I wasn't expecting that, and hence making them act more naturally, more emotionally, and less mechanically? Or what's actually happening there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of method to the madness here. I'm a big fan of Chris Voss. The guy is 30 years veteran FBI negotiator, and he's a very psychologically very sound person. So he has some kind of concept called how you label the conversation, how you mirror, so that in a manner that allow your prospects to open up. When the prospects open up, they're more likely going to reveal a lot of important stuff which can work in sellers' way, because you can use those words to ensure, so in a way, suppose somebody is talking more about the price, or implementation timeline. I would simply say, hey, the price came in the conversation multiple times. While I see that you are a value sensitive person, but at the same time, you're a price sensitive person as well. So what are the key factors that would you consider to make a decision on something like that? Obviously, the price is going to be the factor. What else? So it's very important to understand what is the laundry list of buying or functionalities, or would be features or element of the product, so that you understand that how you can rig that buying criteria in your favor. So sales is all about psychology, and also, right? So reverse psychology and all these things. I don't want to go too much into depth, otherwise we'll spend maybe 3 or 4 hours. But I'm a big fan of, I read a lot of books to make sure that that expand my thought process also, and I bring that kind of experience in my conversation with the prospective customer. But it's all about how you mirror. Suppose somebody say, hey, can you include this in the proposal? As include this. So that's mirroring. And they say, yeah, because I need to do this, then that, and they'll go about telling this. So you mirror the conversation, then you label this hey, sounds like, or it appears like you really cared about this, because as a result, this is what you want to achieve. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then you're validating that value hypothesis to ensure that how you rig not only the buying criteria, but you rig the buying committee in your favor too.
Right. Okay.
I'm not sure, I just kind of blabbered, but am I making sense?
What could you explain again? Mirroring. So who's saying what in that conversation? Like you ask the prospect to include something in the proposal.
Yeah. So let's say if a prospect asks you to do something administratively, right?
Yeah.
And then just use the few words to in a question manner or make it like you were asking a question. So let me think of an example that can your application run on AWS? I'll say run an application on AWS. So that's a mirroring. And
Mm.
yeah, because that's important because we're using AWS, we don't have Azure. In the past, we tried to do this. They will start explaining.
Okay.
They'll
So
just open up.
they give you a question. You then ask them the question back, oh, run on here, and then they then start
Yeah.
explaining why that's important, and then you can include that in your proposal. So then the buying committee is like, oh, these are exactly our problems, and they've included it in like hard text.
Yes, because that they'll try to explain, like, okay, Suraj, if your mom says, Suraj, get back by 8 p.m., you'll say, 8 p.m.? Then your mom will explain, like, why it's
Yeah,
important
yeah. We have guests coming over, and this is happening, that's happening. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's so true.
So that's what you call it, the psychology is called mirror or mirroring this. So that the idea behind it is that how you want your prospects to open up. So we sell to the CTOs and CIOs and VP engineering. These are very analytical kind of a people. They hate talking to the salespeople.
Yeah.
And salespeople are like big charge personality, like bam,
Oh,
bam,
yeah.
I'm just good about that. So we want to make sure that we're not beating around the bush and we're to the point. We're talking to them. We don't spend too much time, exchanging pleasantries and things like that. So coming directly to the point because they care about solving certain problem. So again, depending on the personas and the personality type, there's a lot of things that goes in sales. That's why I have a lot of respect for SDRs who are like junior sales rep because they might be slaving away, sitting somewhere in the corner, burning the midnight candle,
Yeah.
calling 60 or 70 prospects in a day and doubling with the emails and LinkedIn. So they are basically the carry the lot of revenue part, very impactful job.
Right. They're like the backbone of the sales pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you mentioned you do a lot of coaching, right? So with Sprinto, you're doing coaching. What do you coach in terms of, are you coaching people to generate leads? Are you coaching people to cold call? Are you coaching for both of those things?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's completely fine. I was just going to say, and like, actually, you know what? How about answer that? And I've got a follow up question. I got a follow up question about the people that you coach.
All right, perfect. So a lot of people, Sprinto is a startup. It's a 130 people strong company now. They were founded during the COVID. They raised funding of $12 million and all those. They're doing very well in terms of the win rate. So if you're pitching to 10 prospects, you're winning at least 3. The idea is that how we can improve the win rate and reduce the sales cycle. Sooner the better. If you reduce the sales cycle, that positively impact your cost of acquisition of the customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're coaching is that a lot of young people who are coming in sales with maybe a prior 1 or 2 experience, and more often than not, they have managers and bosses who kind of manage them, but not coaching them. Secondly, these people also learn from their past experience, past bosses, colleagues, and all. So they're everywhere. So an accountant will talk to a fellow accountant in certain language, right? There's a lot of language. Sales has like thousands of different languages. So what we're trying to do is that bringing a little bit of method to this madness in a way to be more disciplined, creating a playbook or framework in a manner that they can practice it, rehearse it. So hundreds of hours goes in practicing until you internalize them. To talk in a manner that will be more impactful and work in your favor when you interact with a prospect. A lot of people think I'm a free-flowing guy. I'll just go and strike the conversation. But more often than not, you start blabbering if you're not prepared. So bringing that discipline in your life or the way you spend a day in your life, that, charting out things well in advance and crank out those activities that need to be done in a manner. Yeah. So coaching in a nutshell, talking about the methods, negotiation skills, how you do the solution presentation. So what are the pitfalls that you should be avoiding in a prospecting call? And obviously in 18 years, I spent a lot of failures that I've seen in my life as well. And I learned from those mistakes and the failure. to incorporate certain methodologies to go about, selling.
And then what are the biggest mistakes then that junior salespeople make? And what part of the sales process did it make them in?
Making sound like, you are the best. When if I can sit here whole day and say, like, let me tell you how wonderful and great Sandeep Shekhar is. I have done this, I've done that. And do you think that would you be very interested in talking to me? Because I'm making things about me.
Yeah, probably not.
So, the idea is, like, if I say, hey, Suraj, very interesting upbringing that you had. Just tell me more about, like, how did you spend your childhood? Or what did you do? I mean, what college that you went? Oh, okay, you did this. You will be talking to me for hours because I'm making this all about you. The biggest mistake that I see that salespeople do is that we open up the conversation, we share the screen, and then talk about, these are my logos, these are my story. It's mine.
Right. And
So,
they do this on calls to a
oh
prospect?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, you're going to the doctor and doctor says that, hey, Mr. Patient, look at that, my certificate that's hung in the wall first. Nobody does that, right? So making the call all about your prospect is the way to go.
Yeah. But have you seen, like, people that you coach calling prospects and then talking about themselves on those calls?
Yeah, talking about themselves is like, let me tell you that how Sprinto is currently helping these customers. These are the logos that we have. We were founded in 3 years ago, and all these things. I think, like, there's nothing right and wrong in sales approach, but I think it's a real estate that you're wasting because you've got 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you're wasting, like, even 5 minutes, that will keep you away from asking good questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you're getting on the call because I want to learn more I want to see your business world through my eyes and see whether or not we can help you. We can determine this in 15 to 20 minutes of the conversation. So I've jotted down 6, 7 questions for you that I'm going to breeze through. Are you going to be okay with that? Me asking you those questions. And naturally, you will be wanting to ask me a bunch of questions. Who you work with, what our pricing looks like, the implementation timeline, and whatnot.
Yeah.
Correct? And then if we are a fit, then probably second half, 20 minutes, I'm going to spend seeing system live in action and show you everything that you care about based on whatever the information that I gathered. Because no heck in the world, I'm going to show you everything in my product in the next 20 minutes, but at least I want to leave you with the taste or flavor of what we can do. And if we need to dive deeper, probably we can set some breakout sessions and dive deeper, stick around, take all this question. Does that sound okay to you? All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and get started. So you're setting up the context. Second mistake the salespeople do is they set up an agenda, not an objective.
Mm-hmm.
So, objective is very much that what do you hope to gain from this? End of the call, where you want to be. That's very, very important.
Right.
So, if I would say, like, Suraj, these demos typically go one of the two ways. Either you hate it, if that's going to be the case, we'll leave you be. We'll part ways as friends. In fact, I'll share the best recipe of my biryani too. So I'm going to add, like, a little bit of humor there.
Yeah.
Second outcome could be that you loved everything that you saw and continue to explore working with us. In that case, we can determine next step. Can we stop 5 minutes before just to make sure that whether or not we want to go to the next step?
Yeah.
These are the setting objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Agenda is all about introducing what's your role and responsibility, ask some questions, get into the product demo, and you get out. But objectives is, like, a clear path on alignment for the next steps. The next could be, like, we can part ways as well, or we can move forward.
Right. So having clear conclusions, making sure that every call has a clear, conclusive outcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true. I can see how that would save a lot of resources, right? Because then if it's a maybe and then it gets left in the CRM 3-4 weeks later, someone looks at it, manager looks at it, hey, what was the outcome here? And they're like, yeah, they're not sure, it's a maybe. Or I give them another call and see how it goes. And that process keeps rolling over and over, and you have a buildup of prospects in your CRM, in your pipeline that are maybes. You waste a lot of time and resources.
Yeah, there's a lot of fat there and the fluff, because that will keep you away from investing your time with high impact deals or opportunities. But because you are chasing the wrong opportunity, it just costs you time, it costs you incentives and the money that's on the line.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then, so I had a question. Hopefully, it doesn't fall out of my head now. Okay, so yeah, when you're coaching them, and you obviously want to hear how they sound on a call, you want to give them feedback on that. So, do you sit in on those calls? Do you have
Yes.
them record the calls, then you play them back, or how does it work?
Yeah, so there's a lot of tools out there like Gong or Wingman, and these are call recorders. But also, they're pretty smart about filtering out the words that are being used, or salespeople, especially in India. I see that they create verbose. The things that can be explained in one sentence can be four sentences long and all, because we have fear that whether the prospect understood or not.
Yeah.
And typically that's quite prevalent across the sales team in India that I see. Yeah, I mean, I talk about diction. I talk about how when you get into the character and package it. How you use your facial expression when you're asking some tough question by showing that you are being uncomfortable, but it has to be asked.
Yeah.
And in a way, your prospect will give you that permission that no, you're not crazy for asking this question. I mean, it was easy,
Yeah.
but it has to be asked because you're trained to ask this question that can work in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give an example. A lot of salespeople don't feel comfortable talking about the budget part on the price before the demo. The pricing comes after the demo, but the problem with that approach is you ended up spending an hour doing free consulting just to know the guy's broke.
Yeah.
What a waste of that time.
Yeah.
Right. So I would rather give them a little bit of range of investment they're going to fall in beforehand, and asking that, are you comfortable with that range of investment that you're going to fall in, or is it over before even we get started about the next steps?
Mm-hmm.
The outcome could be it could be a little stretch. No, I'm fine. It looks reasonable. So let's say our price is $6,000 to $10,000. Which side of the range that you think that you're going to fall in? Naturally, the guy will pick up 6.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll do a reverse psychology. Oh, I thought you were going to pick 10. Look at the gravity of the problem that you were trying to solve.
Mm.
And oh no, $6,000 is already a stretch for me. We have to go here and there and all, knock doors and get that funding.
And I guess if he or she says 6, you're going to say, "Oh, I thought you'd say 10."
Yeah, so that's a reverse psychology.
Right, that's smart, man. That's really interesting stuff.
It's like giving you that rank, 1 to 10. I say I thought you were going to give me 3.
Yeah, exact same thing, right? Because keep creating that shock value to the customer,
right?
And then they act more impulsively or more naturally. I guess when you, yeah,
and in your favor. Well, no, I mean, why would I not give you 8? I mean, you do this, and that was I like that. Oh, you said you like that part, and so what stood out to you? Have your prospects say that yes, you are solving this problem. So when I show an element of a product, I would say hey, you mentioned just beforehand that maybe collecting evidence is a nightmare for you now. Let's see how does that look in Sprinto. I promote that element and say, does it align with what you had in your mind? Do you see that Sprinto solving this problem?
Yeah.
You keep doing this. So you should have that relevance, hooking that relevance with the element of the product, and keep doing it based on the information that you gathered in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And use that in the product rather than going and do feature dumping and clicking and buttons and hundreds. You end up confusing your prospect.
Mm-hmm.
So show them what matters to them. And that's why discovery becomes one of the most important step in your sales cycle.
And what's the best way to find, in those first 15 minutes, what's the best way to find out, the key problems of your prospect? Is it directly asking? Because I think there's a fear of projecting your bias by saying, hey, do you find this a problem? Or do you find situation A or situation B a problem?
Right.
And you want them to say yes to that. So you've already thrown out situation A or B. People talk about this in the startup world for identifying potential customers to serve. Because you go to your customer and say, let's say I'm creating, I don't know, some email automation tool. I might come to you and say, hey, Sandeep, do you find it a problem that you have to send too many emails per day and it's irritating? Because, actually, that's, you know what I mean? Because I'm projecting onto you. Whereas you might have a bigger problem that's nothing to do with email automation. It might be actually due to be with meeting scheduling or something slightly different, right?
I got it. So, yeah, you got to prepare your questions. So that should be a part of the playbook, the question that you want to ask. So typically, when people come, they sign up for the demo or something. I've done during the discovery, I would ask hey, typically folks like yourself, when they talk to us, they fall in one of the two camps. Camp number one are those folks who realize that, let's say, security compliance is a problem, is going to be continue to be a problem if they waited on it. So they have decided to solve this for good.
Mm-hmm.
Camp number two are those people who tell me, Sandeep, we don't know what we don't know. So I'm here to explore what's out there and then make a decision whether we need it or not. Which camp do you think that you are falling in right now? Based on that answer, the camp one is educated buyer. They're exposed to the intricacies of the compliance and all. Then I'll mold a demonstration completely in a different way. So interesting. All right, perfect. Can you just tell me, what level of automation you are using in your current process? That will give me an answer. It's like gauging question. And also hey, what's happening in your business that's driving you to get compliant?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are the customers demanding because you were getting a lot of questions on security? So you need to automate that part. You're running here and there. Are you losing deals because of that? Or the deals are getting stuck during the review process of security? Yeah. And then I'll say, what steps need to be made to make a yes or no decision, maybe by the end of the month? What circumstances need to be met for you to move forward this month? Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of questions that I asked regarding where we are solving that problem, knowing that we're going to solve the problem, and this could be the pain point for our prospective customer. That's why they're talking to us.
Yeah.
We have a solution for that. So I'll design the question in a manner that will hit them that, I'm not able to do that. So you have to look for what's your table stake feature that can help the problem. What's your differentiators so that you can keep the competition at bay? What's the expanded outcome overall for the business? And what will be the ripple effect on everybody who's going to be involved in this? Mm-hmm. So once you ask those impactful questions, your impactful questions will not pop up on your mind spontaneously. You got to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
To what extent do you think that you're losing a business because you're non-compliant? So that's a targeted diagnosis question.
Yeah.
But open question, why do you think that's happening in your business, is a very open-ended question that will allow you to come from any direction and answer to me. Then I'm going to lead with the targeted question in a way that to what extent this is happening because of this. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, exactly. This is happening. So the pain, bigger the pain, bigger the gain. So, that's important. I hope I was able to answer.
No, absolutely. That's really, really informative, very insightful. We've got a couple more minutes left. I wanted to touch on, you mentioned tools like Gong and Wingman. So I want to just touch on general topic of, the future of technology in sales. So what technologies do you use at the moment, and where do you see the technology in sales going? Where do you think the modern technological world can add the most value in sales?
Yeah, so there's a lot of disparate solutions out there, right? You have a call recording, you try to analyze those calls and see that how it's impacting the win rate and all. So there are forecasting tools, there are CRM. CRM is pretty static in nature because that depends on a lot of data and the upstream problem. So putting a lot of data to make sense out of that data. So you have a forecasting tool. Unfortunately, a lot of tools are not integrated. So there's a lot of consolidation happening. Gongs of the world, now they're getting into the forecasting, apart from recording those calls. Then also they are trying to get into the sales engagement platform, which is more geared towards SDRs for prospecting, because it simply automates and allow you to reach out to the more prospect in lesser time. Mm-hmm. Because of the sequences, because of the inbuilt phone system and all those things that you have, you just point and click, boom, you are off the races. So I think this space, the sales space, there are a lot of tools out there floating. Now the bigger players, they're gobbling up smaller players and try to consolidate now.
Right, I see.
So that it becomes a one-stop shop. So you can have a CRM. Oh, I can do a forecasting right from here. I can record the calls as well so that I can use this to coach my sales reps. Yeah. Because I'm not able to kind of understand that what's separating the best rep from the rest. Oh, yeah. They're using these things. Now I'm going to just kind of spread and scale this across the team. So the need for to have 4 different tools, manage 4 different bills, rely on different, not to mention there will be a clash of integrations because of the infrastructure or whatever. Now these companies are getting all this together and increase their offering. So bigger ticket for them, mm-hmm. plus different problems you're solving under one roof.
Right, I see. So this is like a consolidation phase in sales where you've got some big players and now they're trying to do everything. So I know Gong is voice analytics, call analytics. So now they're getting into the CRM space to almost compete with the likes of HubSpot, Salesforce, that kind of thing.
Right.
Interesting.
So they're actually getting into the forecasting as well, because
Okay.
the revenue operations is a nightmare to chase people to update those numbers, or whatever the notes you're taking is not going into the CRM.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that because the forecasting tools like Clary acquired Wingman,
Hmm.
right? And Wingman was a competition of Gong.
Yeah.
So the Clary, and also they're talking to maybe acquiring some sales engagement platforms. So they have covered SDR, they've covered the revenue operations now,
Yeah.
and if you get a CRM, then the A side of the thing.
So
So
I've heard of Wingman actually. So who acquired them? Clary. Is that CLARI?
yes, Clary. So they are sales revenue. They're primarily designed to serve the revenue operations, who actually touch three different departments: sales, marketing, and CS, customer
Okay.
success.
Okay.
So their job is to look into the data and try to analyze that. Oh, why these reps have lesser win rate? Because they're not multi-threading. They're only depending on one buyer, where it takes battalions of buyers to make a decision now. So you better start
Okay.
doing the multi-threading. So the concept is multi-threading. That
Right.
means touching every buyer personas and buyer group, so that you can take everybody into the confidence of making this change, building relationships, and
Interesting.
yeah,
So it's like a meta level analysis of your
right,
sales reps. That
yeah.
okay.
And then this forecasting tool will give you the score on the opportunities, because
Mm,
if there's no activity between your buyer and seller dance is not happening for past 2 weeks, that's a red flag.
yeah.
When was the last time you test that prospect or perspective, an opportunity? If it's too late, the manager who's doing a one-on-ones or meetings should be worried about this. Oh, you're talking to only a person who doesn't even have the authority to make a decision. You don't have
Mm,
access to the power who cuts the check. So what's happening? And we're too far down. How many deals are sitting at maybe initial stage, say price proposal, and it's not moving to negotiation or verbal commitment? These are some of the stages that you define and companies commonly define. So that's a concern, right? So basically, what's happening in the middle of the funnel, if you're a blind spot about that, then there's a problem company wide.
yeah. Right. That is really fascinating stuff. I wonder how these tools you know those things though. Like how would a tool know without user input that this person is not the decision maker, or this person is 3 touch points away from a decision maker, or hey, this person is the executive assistant to the decision maker. So actually they're a really high value person. Like I'm just curious how those tools would even know that.
Yeah, so very importantly, so when you're jotting down your notes and copious notes and everything, a lot of people, salespeople don't wake up every morning thinking that I'm going to update my CRM.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not the part of their,
they like talking, right? Talking and
yeah.
making sales.
So they hate CRM at all. So there are tools that automatically transcript, capture those transcript, plug this in the note section of the CRM and all. Then these tools, forecasting tools, sit on top of the CRM through integrations. They look into those opportunities and various that. They predefine the criteria that are we doing multi-threading? Nope, that's a red flag. So the score is tied up with this. Oh, there are 2 weeks and no conversation happening. There's no next step defined in the meeting. So they'll go in and scan the calendar as well with that thing and see that, oh, there's no any meeting. That means the chances of getting ghosted by your prospect is going to be much more higher. You're just depending on one person who's BTL, below the line guy. You don't have access. So these are some of the red flags. The system go and look into those. And obviously AI has a lot of role to play here, that automatically just streamlines and automate this part.
Mm-hmm.
And then they give you the report where you can filter by how many opportunities that was sitting at 30% weightage or price proposal haven't moved for past 2 weeks. How
Mm-hmm.
many proposals are sitting without next steps or opportunities?
Right.
How many you're not talking to? Like these are your potential for buyer personas that you even haven't talked to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then if your score is below 80, let's say, chances of winning the deal is going to be very, very dismal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Really interesting stuff. Sandeep, listen, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. I found this personally extremely insightful, and I'm sure our listeners will as well.
Thanks for inviting me in, Suraj. Let's do more. And I
Absolutely.
love talking about like sales.
We'll keep in touch for sure. If I have any follow-up questions, or I'm sure we'll have plenty. I'm doing a few of these. I'll have plenty of things to consider. We might have you on for a second episode, and we continue the conversation.
Sounds good, Suraj. Thanks for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about this.
My pleasure, man. Listen, all the best. Take care of yourself. We'll be in touch.
You too. Take care.
See ya.